I'm very pleased today to be talking to Dr. Peter Taylor, the Chairman of TTP Group. We're here at the wonderful location of the TTP campus, which is shortly to be completed and will be the new home for more than 400 employees of the TTP Group. Now, TTP is a technology and product development organisation based on the outskirts of Cambridge, and 2 years ago, in 2021, TTP became a fully employee-owned organisation. All of the company's shares were purchased by an employee ownership trust, an EOT, and RVE advised TTP on that transaction. Peter, welcome, and I'm very pleased to be talking to you today. Peter, could I ask you firstly, what was the background to the sale of the company to the EOT? Were you looking more generally at exit options for the shareholders?
Well, as you mentioned, we had employee share ownership with current employees and ex-employees. We actually had been employee-owned right from the start of the company. And unlike many companies moving to an EOT, we weren't driven by an exit imperative. We knew the benefits and had lived with the benefits of employee ownership. But over the years, the shareholding, despite creating a market, had been moving out of the business. So our objective really was to maintain the benefits of employee ownership by finding a way to make sure that we got quite a substantial amount of the external shares back into the ownership, directly or otherwise, of the current employees.
So what percentage of the shares were actually owned by current employees in 2021?
In 2021, the percentage was down at 25%. Now, when employees leave, they're allowed to keep their shares, or they were allowed to keep their shares, but they would lose the vote. So the company was controlled, but the financial ownership of the company was largely outside the business, including one large corporate that had over 10% of the shares.
I see. So really a way of trying to secure long-term employee ownership.
Very much so, yes. Despite having a trust, which created a market for shares, the internal shareholding was slowly but surely, inexorably declining. And we could just see that getting to the point where employee ownership was meaningless in the business and we would lose all the benefits of employee ownership.
So Peter, did you speak to other business founders or to the employee ownership organisation, the EOA, when you were researching your exit options, and were those conversations helpful?
Yes, we did. Well, because we were already employee-owned, we were reasonably active members of the Employee Ownership Association. And we were not looking at other forms of ownership or other forms of share transfer, exit, or whatever. So yes, through talking to various people, employee-owned companies and advisors, many of which we contacted through the EOA, we explored what the possibilities might be.
And Peter, what made a sale to an EOT an attractive option? Was that predominantly to do with the tax benefits for the shareholders, or were there other things that made that exit route attractive?
I think there were a significant part. I think as I mentioned, we didn't have a drive for exit. So the external shareholders, I never had any requests or pressure to create an exit situation. But I think that when offered with a fair offer, fair value, with tax advantage, then that drew attention and created serious consideration. Added to that, I think the main driver for the external shareholders, particularly the larger ones and those that have played a large part in building the business over the years, was the fact that here was a way of having an exit, diversifying their investments by realising the transaction, in a way that actually maintained and enhanced the share ownership benefits of the company that they had either founded or helped to grow successfully.
And how did you convince those shareholders that they were selling at a fair price when the EOT was offering to buy their shares?
Well, I think that was our RVE, our advisors, went through the process. We are quite a complicated company in structure because part of our work is service offering and part of it is spinning out technology and product businesses. And we also own property and the premises and campus in which we operate. So the valuation was something that was quite complicated, but we were able to communicate how that was built up, and it was recognised as being a fair, given considerations of other businesses and how the valuation was structured.
And some people say that an EOT exit isn't very favourable for shareholders because they get paid over a long period, effectively 5 to 8 years. Was that a concern for your shareholders? They were presented with an offer which, yes, was at a fair price, but they would have to wait, maybe 5 to 8 years to actually be paid out the full value for their shares.
Well, I think in our circumstances, where actually a lot of the shareholders, if we hadn't done anything, they would have probably held the shares for that period of time and longer anyway. So in a way, this was a way of creating less uncertainty about what would be happening over that time period, and giving them the value that the business generated. So no, it wasn't a major concern.
Peter, we've been reading recently in the press that John Lewis Partnership is having issues with its employee ownership structure, and that it may be difficult for employee-owned businesses to attract external equity or maybe even external debt because of the shortcomings of the EOT structure. Now, do you think that's a fair comment? And did that pose any issues for you when you were completing your EOT transaction?
No, it wasn't. We, as I mentioned, we started off employee-owned, and of course, in the early years of a business, you don't have a lot of spare capital. So necessity is the mother of invention, and that drives creativity in how to do business and how to bring funding into those things that you want to do. And we were able to do that successfully in the first 8 years of the business. And we got into a position where we funded our investment from our returns. And so we had the confidence of having worked without the ability to bring equity into the business, that we could do that again in the future.
And certainly it doesn't seem to have stopped your ability to secure debt finance for your business. I think the new campus that is shortly to be completed did secure considerable debt finance to help that funding.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, a very significant amount of debt finance for this.
Peter, once you decided that an EOT was your preferred exit route for securing the long-term employee ownership structure for TTP Group, how did you go about finding an advisor?
Well, that was largely by speaking to quite a few candidate advisors. And I think the main thing that we were looking for was, of course, we want the advisor to be credible in terms of carrying out the transaction, dealing with the legal and financial complexities and the valuation. That, in a way, was taken as read. I think the most important thing was that we were looking for an advisor that could actually understand the complexities of our business, both in terms of the spread and nature of the shareholdings and the motivations of the different shareholders, including the employee shareholders, and also the nature of the business with this mix of service, product, spin-outs, startups and so on. And on top of that, the culture of the business, because the employee ownership is an important part of what leads the culture. So it was the combination of all of that. We were confident from our interactions with RVE that actually, in terms of all of the issues that we would tackle in putting it into place and putting the right thing into place, that we could get some good advice.
What do you think, Peter, will be the long-term impact of employee ownership on your business? What benefits do you hope that it will bring?
Well, I think what we learned from being employee-owned previously was a lot of the benefits that people look to. The independence and self-determination is very important, particularly in a technology business where there's quite a lot of risk-taking. And the collaboration, the we're in it together, the teamwork, this is all reinforced by employee ownership. And when you are tackling, when trying to do something that's never been done before, then having a lot of external shareholders challenging from perhaps a not fully informed point of view does constrain what you can do. So I think it's the culture that it allows and the collaboration that it encourages has enabled us to do things that we could not do in another form of ownership.
And obviously you're here just outside Cambridge. You recruit a lot of very talented university graduates from Cambridge and obviously from elsewhere. Do you think being an employee-owned business helps you to recruit graduates that you need to sustain your business? Because, well, A, there's a financial benefit, but perhaps also B, there's a sense of engagement and purpose about the business.
Absolutely. Yes, we benefit from the fact that engineers and scientists do tend to be intrinsically motivated by doing great things with science and technology. And we have an environment which is business with a purpose beyond profit. And that's sort of an integral part of the employee ownership and encourages that. It's a very competitive recruitment environment, but we find that in terms of providing the opportunities, the rewards, and the satisfaction so that people enjoy what they're doing, it helps enormously in the culture that we can provide.
Peter, an EOT transaction obviously involves a new company being put on top of the existing company. Do you think that presents any problems that the board of the company are now having to report to external shareholders? Have you found that any problems in the relationship between the board and the trust?
Well, it hasn't been a very long time yet, but so far so good. I think the important thing is that the relationship of the board and the company with the staff has always been the key element. With the openness that we've had, with the nature of the company and the staff that we have, there's a great deal of trust and communication anyway. And the staff previously were shareholders, so the shareholders were outside the chairman's office all the time. And that's something that we've grown up with. That's maintained. It's going well so far. What we are trying to do is to find out how to make the most of it. And there are differences, and how can we exploit those so that we can, now that we've got a shareholding effectively that is perpetual, how do we make the most of that in terms of the benefits to the shareholders, the staff, and through that the company?
Having been through the process of converting to employee ownership through using an EOT structure, is there any advice, Peter, you'd give to other business owners who are thinking about their exit options, and anything that particularly appeals about the EOT route?
Well, an important piece of advice actually is if business owners are thinking about what to do next, then do look at EOT very seriously, because it was quite some time before we appreciated that the EOT approach could actually have the flexibility and scope to meet the needs of the business. And that was quite an important part of the feasibility test, if you like, as to whether this is the way ahead. And I think the superficial picture of an EOT, maybe the John Lewis model, is something that is not truly representative of the range of options that are available under an EOT. So it's worth putting the time and the effort with advisors to really see how it can fit with the nature of the business. I'm sure there are businesses where it's not appropriate, but we almost missed the opportunity to make it happen for our business.
Peter, do you think that the nature of TTP's business, which is heavily dependent on recruiting and retaining bright people, graduates from Cambridge and other universities, does that make TTP sort of uniquely well suited to employee ownership, just as maybe other professional services firms who we've seen converting, like architects' practices, for example? Do you think there's something about TTP that makes it uniquely well suited to employee ownership?
Well, I think it's a very good model. I mean, we called ourselves the technology partnership right from the start. And whilst we're not a legal partnership, that element of partnership was always very important. Everything we do through the power of teams and the ability to give and take and collaborate and make the most for all of us. So I think that there are professions, obviously, which are formally partnerships. But I think there are a lot of organisations that aren't formal partnerships that can benefit from that partnership atmosphere that comes from employee ownership.
Peter, through the process of researching about EOTs, and then through the transaction, and then after the transaction subsequently, have you found the Employee Ownership Association, the EOA, a useful resource, a useful organisation to help you understand EOTs a bit better?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, in all sorts of ways. Initially, by learning about employee ownership, and the EOA is not just about EOTs. Actually, as a way to have conversations reflecting our particular needs and circumstances. But then in the process, the EOA has been able to introduce us to other people that have been through the process, and we've learned from that. And in attending EOA events, conference, and training courses, there's a continuing education and learning to help us make the most of this and make sure that we learn from other people's successes and failures, or problems and successes.
And I think you've got two employees who sit as trustees on the trust, Dan and Vidya. I think they have been able to access the employee trustee course that is run by the EOA. I think they found that very helpful.
Absolutely, yes, because it's not just about employee ownership, it's also about being a trustee, being a director, and so that's helped them to get up that learning curve very quickly, yes.
Well, Peter, that's been really, really helpful and useful for you to share your thoughts on your transaction and on employee ownership in general. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you, and thank you for all your help.